June 2nd of 2013 marked the release of the first Intel Haswell processors built on the 22nm process. This includes, but isn't limited to, the i7-4770, the i5-4570, and the i3-4430. At this time, Intel held the crown for the most powerful processor with the i7-4960X, while AMD was still pumping out its controversial FX series. Having once had an FX 9590 myself, the fastest processor from that lineup, I can confidently say that Intel's offerings at the time were definitely a superior choice. Regardless, the processor we'll be looking at today is the i3-4130. This one released in September of 2013, offering impressive performance with an MSRP price of only $120. That being said, it was still quite cut down and very much a low-end processor. It did not support overclocking at all and came with a locked core clock of 3.4 GHz. But although it was a dual-core processor, it did support hyperthreading, which is really the only reason the chip is still capable in 2022. Additionally, the 4130 has a total of 4 threads, a TDP of 54 watts, and came with built-in integrated graphics, the HD 4400. The low TDP and iGPU especially made the 4130 ideal for low-powered commercial systems and was often seen in OEM computers. The test system for today was originally exactly that, the ProDesk 400G1 by HP. When I bought it a while back for $25, it came with the 4130, but I've since upgraded from 8 to 16 GB of RAM and threw in a SSD since the hard drive was beginning to fail. I also threw in a Dell GTX 1080, which pairs nicely with this i3. Although Pascal cards are beginning to show their age, it's hard to imagine anything more modern paired with the 4130, since most cheap budget gaming systems won't have anything better than a 1080. The operating system I'll be using is Windows 7 Ultimate Edition. The 4130 is a capable processor, but I wouldn't really recommend running Windows 10 on any hardware this old. I mean, you could, but the performance decrease is not worth the benefits that come from running a more modern operating system. The only difference I found between the two is a few quality of life changes from 7 to 10, while 7 runs much better. But if you really wanted to, the 4130 could run Windows 10 just fine. Either way, that just about sums up what this i3 is all about, so let's get into the testing. The first test we're going to be running today is Userbenchmark to make sure that the 4130 is performing how it should. Overall, the results aren't so bad. The entire computer scored in the 57th percentile overall, but the i3-4130 got all the way in the 84th percentile, which is pretty good actually. The 1080 got a bit below 50 and so did the rest of the components, and funny enough, even though we do have an SSD in the computer, it didn't actually come up as one and saying that we're missing an SSD. But point is, the 4130 is doing well, so let's get into the rest of the testing. The next game to be tested is Rainbow Six Siege, and it's running pretty well so far. I'm currently in 1440p with overall medium settings, and the game is running pretty well with an average frame rate so far of 77 FPS. It is currently pinned at 100% utilization, but it's only pulling 27 watts, which is less than its maximum TDP of 54. I have 1 HP, I did not deserve to get that kill, but you know what, I'll take it. So, I guess I already did prove that you can play Rainbow Six, maybe you can't play, you can play Rainbow Six Siege in 1440p and medium settings on the i3-4130 with the GTX 1080. Overall, it's a pretty good experience, it's definitely competitive. So, with that, on to the next test. The next game I decided to test is a little bit harder to run, and it's Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands. I last played this game on the Pentium G3420, and it wasn't really a playable experience. But on the 4130, it's pretty good so far. I'm currently in 1440p actually, with the medium settings. The average frame rate so far is decent overall, with an average of 38 FPS, but when I first played through the game, that's about what I was getting the entire time. Wildlands is a really good looking game, and considering this processor is nearly a decade old, it's putting in some work right now. It is pinned at 100% utilization, but temps are staying low at 48 degrees while only pulling 27 watts. Now that we just got engaged into a Unidad patrol, the frame rate has dropped a bit down to 27 FPS, but that's still really good considering what this processor was actually designed for. If it did not have hyperthreading, it would not be able to do this right now. We're down to 23, 26 FPS, so as action heats up, the performance definitely decreases a bit. It's not unplayable, but it's noticeable for sure. I'm going to try dropping the resolution down to 1080p, and hopefully the frame rate will pick back up a bit. Alright, and now that we're back in 1080p rather than 1440, the frame rate noticeably improved. From my experience, as long as you have a stable frame rate, that's what matters more. I've played games at 60 FPS that are a stuttery nightmare, and they're just unplayable. But this, 35 FPS, smooth, and you can even lower settings further. So, yeah, the 4130 can play Wildlands. Now on to the next test. The next game we'll be running on this system is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. We're currently in 1440p with the high settings, and the game is running really well, with an average of 56 FPS so far in this lobby. Alright, I've been on the ground for a few minutes now, and performance is actually about the same. So far, we have an average FPS of 71. Since we know that this will run well, I'm going to try cranking settings all the way up. Alright, and we're on ultra settings now, still in 1440p, and we're pulling an average of 51 FPS while speeding across the map. Considering that this is only a dual-core CPU, PUBG is very well optimized. So, can you run PUBG on the i3 4130? Yeah, you can. It performs very well and offers a very competitive experience. It will stutter from time to time, but I am on ultra settings right now, and if I were to actually play this, I'd probably lower this to medium or high. But with that, it's on to our next test. Alright, and the next game we're testing is Beamng Drive. I'm currently on the Utah map in 1440p with the medium preset, and the game is running very well, with an average of 67 FPS so far. I don't often test Beamng Drive, because it can be a very intensive game to run, and I often don't work with the best hardware. But the i3 4130 is making use of it, and is actually performing very well. I spawned in 2 more vehicles using the traffic configurator, which chose a semi-truck and sedan, and the frame rate is a lot worse right now, with an average of 14 FPS. And it's really lacking in performance here when you have to spawn multiple vehicles. If you want 1 or 2, you can probably get away with it for lower settings and a lower resolution. For some reason, if you want to play Rust, this is the next game we're testing, and the i3 4130 is doing a pretty good job so far. I'm currently in 1440p with roughly the medium settings, give or take. The i3 4130 is clearly the bottleneck of this system, but the 1080 and the 16 gigs of RAM is definitely putting in work as well. What I'm noticing especially about this title is that it's very consistent. I'm not getting any stuttering, any frame dropping, any lag really. So far we have an average FPS of 37, which isn't bad by any means, but it's not good. It's not what most people are looking for. So I'm going to try lowering the settings a bit more and seeing where that gets us. So I just dropped the resolution down to 1080p and lowered the settings by quite a bit, but the performance seems to be about the same, with an average frame rate of 37 FPS. So the 4130 can definitely run Rust, just not the best. If you're looking to build a budget gaming system and for some reason want to play this game, yeah, you could do it. It seems that when I first encounter things, the 4130 slows down a bit. When I was walking past this base, the frame rate did drop down to 29 FPS for a bit, but it did spike back up. So it's not exactly the most consistent at all times, but it's still consistent enough to be competitively playable. So on to the next test. The next game I'm playing is CSGO, and I've been playing it for a few minutes now, and as much as I want to say that it's flawless, it actually isn't. This is stupid. I'm currently running the highest settings in 1440p, which could have something to do with it, but every once in a while, I'll actually get a bit of stuttering or a bit of momentary freezing. I mean, I can't complain. The experience is still pretty well. The game is more than playable in every sense of the word. We're hitting 87, 95, 110 FPS. It's a competitive experience for sure. When it comes to games like CSGO, it's not always about getting the highest frame rate, but also a very consistent frame rate, something that isn't gonna stutter or freeze when you get into a firefight. I'm sure with a few lower settings the game would run better, but overall you can play CSGO on the 4130. Now on to the next test. And the next game to be tested is Fallout 4. I'm currently in 1440p with the high settings overall, and we're getting an average frame rate of 45 FPS. The 4130 was definitely not meant for 1440p, so anytime I can run a game that actually looks decent and 1440p, it's pretty impressive. Of course, you could lower the settings a bit more if you wanted to achieve a solid 60 all around, and you could definitely do it in 1440p as well. But where it's at right now, I think it's a good mixture of quality and performance. I would have tested Fallout 76, but from my experience, it runs bad on most any computer. It's pretty crappy, I'm gonna be honest, but it's a fun game to play with friends. Either way, that just about sums up testing for Fallout 4. As you can see, the 4130 still packs a bit of a punch. Sure, it won't give you the best gaming experience, but considering how little the processor can be found for on used seller websites, it's not a bad option for a budget gaming system. It can still run modern titles and offer a competitive experience in many games. I recently tested the Pentium G3420, which was somewhat similar to this processor in terms of specifications, but the 4130 performed much better largely due to its support for hyperthreading. Most old CPUs that didn't come with that technology don't hold up so well nowadays, and without it, I doubt the 4130 could have performed as well as it did today. Oh, and we also have a community Discord server where we discuss a variety of topics, link in the description. With that, thank you for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. I've left a few donation methods in the description. If you want to directly support the channel, that's a great way to do so. If you have any questions or related comments, to leave them below and I'll be sure to respond to it. While you're at it, consider subscribing or leaving a like because it genuinely helps me out. That's about it. Have a great day. Bye.